Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of We Got Balls. And Scott, today we are going to go do the deep dive. We want to get into the topic of hot girls wanted. And what the heck are we talking about when we talk about hot girls wanted? This seems like an advertisement for Pornhub. We're just shilling for the enemy now. Is that the point?
No.
No. Well, what we want to do in this episode, guys, is if you've ever objectified and looked at another person, especially another woman, and tried to get satisfaction from them, I want you to stay tuned with this episode because we're going to get in deep. As always. Be right back.
We're going balls deep on this episode.
We're going balls deep.
Welcome to We Got Balls, real, raw, masculine sex talk with Chris Inman and Scott Cohn. Here we go.
All right, here we are, guys. Balls deep all the way back in on We Got Balls. Scott loved that line, so we're going to roll with that.
Oh my gosh.
We're still a little bit of the high from the retreat.
You're spilling all your candy in the lobby here, so to speak.
I'm trying to. Well, Scott, I've been thinking about this for a while in my own life. There's a truly human element to how we struggle. And I think it's really easy to get focused on my stuff. And we talk a lot about my story, my experiences, all the things that have brought me to I think you call us the arousal template diagnosers. We're kind of like, we're the sexual arousal template doctors. We're trying to help you decode. No, that's what it is. Decoding your sexual fantasy. Yeah. We're the professionals there. But I think there's an element to this that we really need to consider is what is the impact that we are having not only on ourselves, but also on the people around us in this struggle with porn and sexual brokenness. And you're going to go like, oh, Chris, this is so much of a downer episode. Blah. Well, let's just stick it out. Stick it out for a second. Because I think in our conversation today, we really want to get particular about what it means to be a consumer of pornography, to be someone who objectifies other people sexually. What is the impact on me? How does it affect me as an individual? And how does it affect the other people that I'm objectifying? And how does it affect the environment around me? And when you're thinking about that, Scott, there's a whole lot of stuff we can dig up. This is an infinite well. In fact, our friend Jay Stringer wrote a whole chapter on this in his book, Unwanted. And there's a lot to dig into. But what is coming up for you as we think about this, specifically objectifying women?
So I'm going to be honest on this particular matter. I faced immediate resistance in my body as you began to describe it. And I think it comes from years and years of the scolding and the lectures and the finger wagging, naughty, and the moralizing on this particular issue. Can we just name that? Because what you just said, I think, is the proper order to think about engaging this topic of, let's say you could put all three of these things together: humiliation, degradation, and perversion is that whole kind of category of thing where other people become sex toys for our own personal gratification and pleasure.
A whole. That's the word, by the way. If you've ever listened to Call Her Daddy, that's how Call Her Daddy began. Those girls talking about themselves as holes. And
she's now she's doing commentary for the Olympics, isn't she?
She's hosting Olympic commentary. And listen, she's a very talented young woman. There's no shade on her. I'm not trying. But again, I think we have to speak about this in the context of holding the tension of, it's very easy to look at that and go, well, she's just a perverted woman. She's just a dirty girl. And she's not. She's a human being that's had her own sexual experience and is put out there for, commercialization. But in a sense, that's a little bit of how porn has trained us as a culture to think about people, right?
Yeah. And on the porn pro advocate side of this, there's going to say, well, there's nothing wrong with enjoying porn. You know, you moralizers over there stigmatize it because you're not sex positive, and that's your problem. You have a problem with sex, and so this can be a healthy and positive thing in a person's life or in a couple's relationship or whatever. And you guys are just antiquated in your views. Now that's one particular view. Our position would be coming from kind of a human dignity position. What's the opposite of depravity? What's the opposite of perversion and degradation and humiliation? Is honor,
glory, beauty,
respect,
yes.
And you know, having a sense of the dignity of each person as being image bearers of the invisible God in his attributes, and that would include his sexuality. So let's just say this from the start, that from our perspective as Christians, we believe we're created in the image of a we, not a me. And what that means is at the core of God's being is the relationship, not the usury of one another, but the relating of one to another. And so if we bear that image in our bodies, it seems to me like the greatest area where you can see that play out is in our sexuality, because it's in our sexuality that we display this beauty and this glory and this dignity of wanting to merge and be with another and belong to another and have them belong to us, and doing that in a very embodied, very intimate, very vulnerable way. And I think that's why God created sex, is to demonstrate that goodness.
So let's just say this. For those of you who are faithful people, you kind of get where we're coming from. For those of you who are like, oh, here we go again, we're getting back into the religion. Let's just back it off for a second. What I think we need to consider is, how can we best care for ourselves and each other? I believe that in the context of the way the world was designed, that there is a balance of just what you said, Scott, holding the tension relationally between me and others. And I would put in there God, because I believe there's a purpose for all of us, right? And he kind of directs that. Why are you on this earth, and what's your life going to be about? That's kind of how you figure that out. And there's various ways to discover that. But I think let's just boil it down to the me versus you, or the me versus we dynamic. That in the experience of our sexuality, what a lot of times we've been trained in as very wounded and abused, harmed, maybe even neglected boys, is I've got to look out for me. So what I did when I was young, I'll tell you my first experience where I was actively seeking comfort. I used to go into the bookstore. You remember those bookstores back in the day? I actually went to one a few weeks ago on a trip. I hadn't been in an actual bookstore in a decade. Barnes and Noble, right? Went into Barnes and Noble.
So they're actually still in existence, a place you can go in and actually buy a physical copy of a physical. Wow, that's
like, I had to go to the section where the certain books were that I was looking for and search by author last name to find the book. But I used to go to these bookstores, and I would go to the photography section. And guess what books I'm looking for in the photography section?
Naked body photography.
Erotic photography.
Yeah.
Boudoir photography. You know, and so I go to these picture books, which has women in various stages of undress. And I'm 14 years old. I'm in the mall, just bored, lonely. And I start flipping through these books. And in my body, in that moment, something comes alive. I start seeing things that are forbidden. You talk about the morality of it. There's something wrong about this, something dirty about this, something sinful if you want to come from a religious point of view. But just, this is not what a 14-year-old needs to be looking at in my body, especially in public, right? But it made me come alive. So I, in that moment, entered into this me dynamic. What can I do for me? And it was the beginning of looking at, you know, I've checked out girls, obviously, since I was 10, 11, 12 years old and the way that they looked. But I began to truly hunt for the women who could make me come alive with their bodies. And I began to look at their bodies as material things that I could desire. And I would, depending on whether I was an ass man or a boob man, or frankly, it was kind of the whole package for me. I wanted a good caboose, something good up top, and a cute face when I was that age.
So you're telling me basically you're a male.
Yeah, I'm a dude.
Human. But
I'm a human being.
Yeah.
But that feeling in my body of coming alive, right? That was new. And I kept that for me. I think one of the things that Jay Stringer writes about is that was the beginning of the split of relationship in my body. I was no longer interested in what that person wanted. I was doing that 100% for me. Now, I would put lip service, and this is the great lie of high school guys, by the way. I don't know if you ever had this happen to you. When you're dating a girl and you're making out with her, what are you going to tell her to keep her making out with you and hooking up with you physically?
I love you.
Exactly. I have no clue what I love you meant. I don't care what I love you meant. But I knew that's what she wanted to hear. And I knew if I said that would continue. So I say things because it's about me. And for the whole, I would say probably first 20, 25 years of my life, there was a large majority, maybe even longer than that, a large majority of my experience with women was about what can I get from them. Now, this is going to kick a lot of dudes in the balls. Sorry, you got them. We got to wound them for a second. Because if your experience with other people is to use them and consume them and make them objects, hot girls wanted, there's something incomplete in your life. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying you're necessarily broken. I'm saying there's a part of life that is eluding you.
Yeah, so we were just engaging this in one of my groups a little earlier today, where a guy talked about, his story. And as he begins to tell his story, he goes through his childhood, and it's fairly devoid of any sense of emotional connection or belonging in his family with his mother and father. And then how he began to discover masturbation at an early age, and then pornography. And then, the fantasy progressed. That's one aspect of objectification that we have to kind of name, as well as that it just doesn't stay up here. It's going to look for an embodied way. And I heard something today on John Deloney's show. What's in your head will eventually go to a bed. There is
say more about that, Scott, because that's an interesting statement. What do you think he was talking about when you talk about what's in your head will eventually go to a bed?
He was specifically talking about a friend of mine who actually called into his podcast and asked about a situation that he's experiencing in his relationship with his wife, where he loves his wife and he enjoys sex with his wife, but he has to fantasize about other people to get off on to stay aroused and to be in arousal with his wife, because his wife basically just lays back. And where did this all come from? And kind of he gets into this questioning period with my friend, where he's figuring out the reason you're doing this is because there's not a lot of life in your home. Well, I would go back to this issue of objectification, whether you're objectifying males or females, but you're talking about guys kind of normally objectifying females. But I think it's arising out of a lack of being seen and being cared for in the family, first and foremost.
Okay, so I see where you're coming from in that. And you use the word normal, and I can see where you're coming from in that as well. Can I push back on you just a little bit?
You absolutely can.
All right. I'm not kicking you in the balls, but here's what I'm trying to say.
I'm wearing a jockstrap. So.
It is. That's the way that culture and traditional masculinity, alpha masculinity, sees women as objects, as subversive, as less than. I believe in our culture, thankfully, and in the culture of many faith traditions, women are equals in a respect, dignity, beauty sense. There's a different aspects of masculinity and femininity for sure. But the reality is when men are objectifying women and oogling and lusting after women, it's not because of anything that the women have done. It's not because of anything that they're missing. It's because they have not learned in their bodies what it means to be with, what it means to hold relationally, emotionally healthy connection. Now, you can blame that on mom and dad. You can blame that on abuse. You can blame that on neglect. You can blame that on a bunch of different things, right? We've covered many of those things. But the reality is, as men, as a man, it's my responsibility where I put my eyes and how I draw from others.
So what are you pushing back on? Because we're saying the same thing, aren't we?
Well, I think we're saying the same thing, but I want to be careful that guys don't see this as this is just something I got to fix. What?
Did you say I'm saying this is boys being boys, or this is something I got to fix?
No, you use the word normalized. We've normalized this, right?
Well, we've normalized men objectifying women since, I don't know. I don't know when we started. It's been around a long time.
I agree it has. But what I'm saying is it didn't necessarily always have to be that way. And I think we're getting to a place in culture where it doesn't need to be that way anymore.
Well, but it's definitely, there was a change, I think, that really started taking place in American culture when you start having magazines like Playboy and Penthouse. Playboy was the bigger one, right? Where it's inviting men to look at women's naked bodies wrapped up in interesting stories, right? Sure, everybody's reading the stories, but it created a whole culture around that. And, then the sexual revolution comes about in the 60s and 70s is like, love the one you're with. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you have consent. And then the church's response to that was purity culture, men are pigs and dogs. And here's the thing. Everybody's saying the same thing. You can't help yourself, men. Right. And you are a sex crave monster and you're going to objectify other people. And it's because simply, nobody's been taught how to steward desire in the first place.
Say more about that.
Well, I'm going to go back to Kurt Thompson's statement. We come into the world looking for somebody looking for us.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if Kurt said this, but I think I added to it. And I say, and if we don't find him in our home, we'll keep looking everywhere else until we do find him.
So there we go back to what's in my head will eventually be in my bed. If I don't find that level of connection and relationship in my home, then I will go looking for that in my sexually acting out life. So let's put a little PSA in this. For all of you guys who are like, man, I've struggled with porn. That's the worst thing I've ever done. Be careful, because the reality is if you don't get curious about what it is that you really are missing in your head, in your heart, it's only a matter of time before the acting out will happen in real life. Take it from both of us.
And it doesn't have to be just porn. It can be fantasy, what I'm imagining. Yeah. What do I desire? Like, again, what are the top 10 things you would like to do with your spouse sexually? What are your top 10 sexual fantasies, Chris? Here's an episode for us to do in the future. Here's my top 10 sexual fantasies, and we each share them. But honestly, have you ever done that as men? This is the invitation. Have you ever sat down with your wife and said, without any judgment, but with also no demand that you do these things, here are my top 10 sexual fantasies? Oh my God, that is too vulnerable for most anybody to take. Because at one hand, I've got to hold with an openness and a welcome what it is that you're longing for and desiring. And at the other side, I've got to say, but I don't have to feel obligated to do this either.
So there we're back, moving from the me to the we. So with that being said, how do we get there? How do I, as a person that was focused on satisfying my sexual desire and getting my rocks off and using whatever means necessary to get there, move to a place where I can connect with, in this case, a significant other, a spouse, a partner, a wife who is able to be with me and help me meet those needs and also live out the fantasies that make me come alive.
Yeah, I think you've got to go back. We've said this before. We'll keep saying it until everybody gets it. But the best thing you can do for your sexual story, for engaging what your current sexual struggles are, is to engage your developmental story. Because there's nothing that has a greater impact on you as a developing human being than your relationship with your father and mother. The rule of the brain, as Adam Young likes to say, is relationships are more influential on the development of human beings than anything else. And the earlier in life those relationships are, the more influential they are. So it's just going to fact that parents have the greatest impact on your sexuality over anything else in your life. But you don't see, well, what do you mean? My parents, they didn't sexually abuse me. They didn't neglect me. Well, it's how your parents related to you, how they made you feel welcomed and cared for in the relationship, because it's what's done with your desires and disappointments that it turns out shapes your sexuality in the first place.
And I think that's important to acknowledge, Scott, that when we're going back into our developmental story, into what we would call our childhood wounds and stories of harms and blessing of our younger years, we're actually opening up a portal into us. That there really is a window into what you just said. How was I formed relationally? And frankly, those things don't get explored very much, because we don't feel like that's relevant. The behavior is relevant. I should just do better, or stop this, or start that. When the things that I do, and even more the things that I want and the things that I feel and the things that I think, are rooted in those developmental issues. And when I get curious and open up that Pandora's box of what for me was essentially relational programming, right? It was just what I caught from mom and dad or not. Then I can go back into that and begin to say, how is it that I can learn to not be focused on survival? That's the me, right? The survival is me orientation. I have to get what I need. To heck with all of y'all. I will screw all of y'all over if I have to, as long as I get my needs met. From survival into connection, which is the we. That's where true growth, health, life is born, right? And that's, as you argued before, and I would agree with you, that's how we were designed to live, in that relational connection.
And here's what I think the essence of that, Chris, is when you ask the question, have you ever been in a place where every part of you is welcome, especially the parts that you think are the most shameful, the most disgusting, the most vile, the parts you want to keep hidden and secret and in the basement? Have you ever been in a relationship where those parts of you are welcome? Because that, it turns out, is what makes us feel most alive, to know that every part of me is welcome. And I'll give you a great example of this. I know a guy who was in recovery, went to the best recovery place you can go to as an inpatient program. And they really helped him deal with his shame. He got his shame reduced. He wasn't feeling shame for sexually acting out. His wife was seeing him make progress and everything. And he still was lying and acting out the whole time, because he could not get over the reality that when he went to a massage parlor and took off all his clothes and walked around naked, he felt like every part of him was welcome. That's why he couldn't stop. So instead, all the recovery programs that are, the mainline ones that get all the attention, that everybody brags about, the 12 steps and all this, they're all focused on getting that guy to stop going to the place where he felt truly alive in his life. You have to become curious about why that place makes you feel alive. Tell me more about when you started to feel dead in your family. Because look, you weren't born feeling dead. Nobody comes out of their mom going, this life sucks.
But Scott, when you flip on the screen, pick up the phone, scroll to the website, type in the words, and the videos that begin to make you come alive start appearing before you and start playing. When you walk into the massage parlor and you take off your clothes and you walk around naked and you lay on that table and you're touched in a way that makes you come alive. When you go to that location where you can pick up that woman who's going to get in your car and offer you the attention and the care on your penis, the love for your penis that no one wants to show affection to, even you, because you hate it too. But she will adore it. She will caress it. She will welcome the beauty and the desire of your body in that moment. That's also mixed up with, I can't talk to anybody about this.
Yeah. And that's what creates the objectification. What is objectification other than, I'm going to go out and get this myself?
Yes. I have to survive to get mine. And in the process, I think the reality is, Scott, that as I'm getting mine, I'm also destroying me and the other people that I'm with.
Yeah.
Because it's incomplete.
So just stick this in your head and remember it. Hurt people hurt people.
Wow. Who said that?
I don't know. Objectify, people that objectify have been objectified. They learned to treat their body like a thing.
Yes.
And because that's how I was trained to treat my body, it is no big deal for me to treat other people's body that way. That's the way of the world. And it is the way of the broken world. So we have to name that reality that this is all coming from a place of harm that we're seeking to kind of, in one way, reverse, but at the same time, it perpetuates the harm that was in our lives. And you know, like we've said to so many guys that we coach is, when are you going to stop re-traumatizing yourself? Because the way you're acting out is an exact repetition of how you were used growing up, of how you were abused growing up, of how you were neglected growing up. And you're continually putting yourself in those situations because it's more comfortable to live in that reality than to imagine a different reality where I can sit down with you and tell you my top 10 sexual fantasies and they'll be welcomed.
And that's the work of masculinity, in my opinion, which is stepping bravely and boldly into those hard conversations. What does it mean for me to get curious about when I look on the screen and I see that woman who maybe I've looked at for years, maybe she's brand new on the scene. You know, that happens a lot, especially in porn, where you have these young 18-year-old girls who, for whatever reason, decide I'm going to make some money by getting on screen and taking off my clothes and being penetrated and being objectified and abused. And she's young, guys. She's naive. She's innocent. I've seen it time and time again when I was watching porn. The earlier you catch a woman in her cycle of acting in porn movies, the more innocence is in her eyes. And yet, as you watch her age, that innocence dies. And it's because she's being treated, like you said, like something to be consumed. And she's being hurt by hurt people.
And every time you consume that, there's more of your innocence that dies.
Yeah. Light in your eyes die as well. That's why, you know, having a bunch of bodies, a bunch of sexual partners can't be a good thing, because you're literally giving your light to these people and having them take it, and you're taking theirs, and that can be redeemed and changed over time. But it does take from us what we have to give and what we have to receive. And it's only in the connection, as we were intended to have, with other safe, mutual, caring people, that we can find true satisfaction. Now, what you just described, Scott, it's fucking hard to get there. And that's the point. If love came easy, it wouldn't be worth anything. But love is hard. And, you know, you talked about your friend who called into the podcast. He was fantasizing about other things because he was having sex with his wife and felt that she was just a corpse. That's hard.
Yeah. And he even talked to her about it. And she was like, well, I don't really want to do anything about it. So, and
guys, if you're in that place, we grieve with you. We don't have any answers. There are no quick fixes. We've both been in situations in our relationships where things are just hard. And frankly, in some senses, they're still very hard. But the work ahead of us is not to go consume another person so that I can survive. The work ahead is to continue to walk into what it would look like to be curious and kind with my own desires, to find the way to meet them in a way that's mutual and connective and kind and curious.
Yes.
I don't know how else to say it other than to set a high bar for you. Listen, I've been watching the Olympics. I don't know if this is 2024, the Olympics are on, and I'm watching time after time after time people do the impossible. How do you do those things? How do you achieve that? It's because they work at it every single day. So the human spirit is alive in us all, men and women, friends. And I would just encourage you that if you want to find what you're looking for, keep looking in a way that doesn't destroy you and those around you. So as I say these things, Scott, I just want to remind everybody that there's the opportunity to connect. We're always live on YouTube on Fridays, 11 a.m. Central, 12 Eastern, and 9 a.m. Pacific. So we want to continue to engage with you. There's going to be more opportunities to do group work and retreat work. You can find out more information about that at successfulmen.com. And Scott, there's always an opportunity to speak with us by sending us a question at wegotballs00@gmail.com. So there's a bunch of ways to connect. I mean, we're doing everything we can, right, buddy? I mean, what else do we need to do?
And if you want to find out about individual coaching as well as any of the groups that we're leading, we have a button on the website where you can schedule a consultation meeting with Chris and I, and then we'd be happy to talk.
I bet you I get more clicks than you do. What do you think? We're going to keep tabs of that? You think?
I don't know. Maybe I'll put your name above me to see.
Nah, it doesn't matter. Pick either of us. We're glad to talk to you, to spend the time with you for sure.
So thanks for joining us on this episode of We Got Balls.
And you do too.
See you guys.
Take care, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris and with Scott at successfulmen.com.